how to set an SEO strategy for 2026. Hello and welcome to the January 2026 edition of the Majestic SEO panel on how to set an SEO strategy for 2026. I'm your host, David Bain, and joining me today are four wonderful guests. Let's meet them, starting off with Georgia.
Hi, I'm Georgia James. I am a senior technical SEO lead at an agency called Flaunt Digital, who are based in Leeds, UK.
Thank you, Georgia. And also with us today is Sukh.
Hi guys, my name is Sukh. I'm a freelance SEO consultant at I Do SEO. I'm based in Leicester in the UK, and I've been doing SEO coming up to 18 years now. I'm having a blast doing it as a freelancer.
Wow, okay, thanks so much, Sukh. And also with us today is Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Libert. I'm a co-founder at Fractal. We're a digital PR and earned media agency out of Florida, and I've been doing this for also about 18 years.
Wow, okay. And finally, also with us today is Sabine.
Hi, my name is Sabine. I'm from Sweden, so tuning in from Stockholm, SEO specialist working at an agency called Maya Marketing.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to have a great discussion about how specifically to set up an SEO strategy for 2026. Let's start off by thinking about where we are optimizing for. In the past, I guess the assumption would have been Google, but perhaps not so much nowadays in 2026. So Sabine, shall we stay with you? Where does discoverability happen in 2026?
Well, probably a lot of people have heard that SEO has been called search everywhere optimization lately, kind of getting back to that shortening. And I'd say that kind of sums it up, that it does happen basically everywhere. For some of our clients on the agency side, we see real opportunity and search volumes at, for example, on social media. So looking into the actual search trends happening on YouTube and TikTok, and not only mentioning those channels when you talk about the social media strategy, but also including them in the SEO and search strategy, for example.
Okay, so I mean, this is obviously opening up a whole can of worms in terms of who's responsible for it. If you work with a social media department, how open they are to actually receiving some form of direction in terms of optimizing social media. But perhaps we can have that conversation in a touch. Georgia, should we go back to you? Where does discoverability happen as far as you're concerned in 26?
Yeah, I think Sabine's right that touch points are becoming a lot more complicated, and users are kind of finding brands in places that kind of we can't really even anticipate. It's kind of word of mouth, and actually off-site trust and authority is really helping to bring authenticity to those brands and to inform user decisions, which again, as you say, with you kind of face the same problem as you do with social, where that's then quite hard for SEOs to manage. Who do you then get to manage that and manage that kind of community and building that trust? So I think it's really important for SEOs going into 2026 to think about how they can work cross-channel more effectively to anticipate those touch points, how they can be encouraging sort of brand managers and stuff to be building those communities. People talk about Reddit a lot, but that's not really somewhere that kind of necessarily rewards loads of really kind of high marketing like targeting from brands. So how can you show that there authentically, if you can at all? And is that something that really needs to sit with SEO, or should we be actually trying to work more collaboratively cross-channel to help appear at every one of those touch points?
And Kelsey, what would you think about discoverability in 2026? What should we be aiming for?
Yeah, I think the ladies here nailed it, right? I mean, everyone's talking about cross-channel distribution nowadays, and it's a term that's been around for probably 20 years, but it's really a key point now. It depends on your target market. We use SparkToro, which is a great tool that I highly recommend for consumer research and just audience research, really, persona building. And it tells you kind of from what podcasts people are listening to whether they use ChatGPT over Perplexity over Claude or Google, which publishers they're reading, and really any talented, whether it's SEO team, a digital PR, or in media social, they all come together to infiltrate all of these channels. So in my opinion, these teams should be coming together on a monthly or more regular basis to ideate together about kind of what are the topics that our audience cares about, and then how do we distribute them across all the channels that our specific audience exists on and engages on. Because typically any content strategy that's done well can penetrate each one of these channels. And especially if you're taking a more data-driven or subject matter expert lens on it and providing true value to that community, that's a great way to get into anywhere versus, you know, if you're doing an advertorial, that's pay to play and you're not going to get as much engagement on any of those channels generally.
Lovely. Okay. And just before we move the discussion on to specifically what we should be doing within our SEO strategy in 26, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we measure success, what we're aiming for. But just before we get there, Sukh, what are your thoughts on discoverability in 26?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Essentially looking at how to appear everywhere, I try to take a step back and root everything in global KPIs when thinking about collaboration with different departments and team members, and establishing basically, okay, what are the main KPIs, or at least metrics if people don't want to commit to KPIs, are going to make a direct impact on the business, and then work backwards from that to, you know, associate those with the relevant people and the relevant teams. And if there are any shared KPIs, then agree, okay, so here's what we're going to do to contribute towards this KPI. You know, for example, if I've done a bunch of keyword research that I want to optimize on some, you know, TikTok and some Instagram reels that are related to blog content that I'm creating and podcasts, for example, then, you know, we can then work backwards from the responsibility of KPIs or metrics and say, okay, here's what I'll do to contribute toward this, hand it over to you with a nice little template to include keywords in there. And so it's basically that top level agreement of metrics and KPIs that I try to root all of this in, as well as, you know, other fundamental plans like, you know, which audiences we're targeting, the personas, what's going to get them to engage and convert, and how can myself and people in the team contribute towards the content to get them to engage and convert. So it's just that initial agreement and rooting everything into KPIs, or at least metrics.
Okay, so you talked about KPIs, metrics quite a bit there, Sukh. How do you go about deciding what the KPI should be? I mean, I would imagine if you're working with a business, then they'll have a certain idea, but obviously, you know, from an SEO perspective, what metrics are more likely to measure success more effectively. So how do you combine your thoughts to come up with a metric that satisfies you both?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, yeah. So looking at, you know, whether it's lead gen or e-commerce, kind of looking at those top level conversion metrics, you know, so, you know, for example, as a result of all traffic, you know, conversions or revenue or transactions, and then working backwards from that, specifically from my channel, organic conversions or revenue or transactions, and then backwards from that, okay, so what's going to impact that? Keyword visibility, AI overview, AI visibility, brand versus non-brand keyword visibility, which I'm looking at more and more these days as the distinction between those two, brand and non-brand searches. So it's all kind of starting from that top level of a more than likely a conversion or transactional kind of metric, and working backwards from that.
Okay, let's get everyone else's thoughts on metrics and KPIs as well. Georgia, how do you decide what metric to use to measure the success of your 2026 SEO strategy?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think it's something that, again, should be a conversation with kind of people commercially who are responsible for, if you're working at an agency for that client, or in-house for your organization, to find out what is actually going to, if you're reporting back on it, what is going to help people see the value in what you're doing. As SEOs, there are many metrics that are kind of useful to us, and I know people have been talking about sort of rankings and impressions as a bit of a vanity metric for a while, but as we're moving into an era increasingly of AI search, that's becoming, things like metrics like that are becoming less and less useful. We don't necessarily have that data for LLM search in particular. And so whilst these are great indicators for us of where the needle's moving and where our green shoots are, I think keeping, as I said, keeping a focus on those kind of end of the line conversion metrics, be that kind of form fills or like conversions in kind of a traditional e-commerce sense, is really important. And the other thing that I think a lot of brands are thinking about at the moment is improving efficiencies internally for them operationally, which doesn't necessarily feel like something that we as SEOs would support with, but we're kind of getting more and more clients talking to us at the moment about not necessarily wanting that weight on their customer service team or their sales teams. There's a lot of resource going on there, and can we streamline that? And so I think as well, there's a bit of a sort of rapport and just getting that direct feedback from people who are involved in the sales that can also really help you to inform what additional content might need to go on the site, where there might be pain points in the conversion path. And if you can get the kind of verbal feedback from them that actually their time is being able to be spent elsewhere, they're able to focus on sort of more difficult or more complex challenges in their job role, then that is also something that as SEOs we can report back on and kind of highlight to stakeholders and shareholders as something that we've achieved through our optimizations.
And Georgia, you talked about focusing on kind of last stage metrics. You mentioned form fills, things like that.
Yeah.
How do you tie back maybe the referring medium or the channel responsible for that call to action? Because obviously if you have a brand mention within an AI search engine or something like that, you're not necessarily going to be able to get a click through from that and measure the impact of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's mention kind of tracking the impact of mentions from LLMs is something that I think a lot of SEOs are struggling with. Nailing down your on-site tracking, so you're not just tracking those final metrics that you are converting on, but you've also got tracking in place for other interactions on the site that maybe you don't see as commercially as being as pivotal, but you've got there to use as a data point, can be really useful in tracking that user journey when users land on site. And then in terms of tracking that attribution, I mean, you can see referrers in GA4. That's kind of generally probably the most useful way of seeing how much traffic you're getting through, and then figuring out how much of that is whether you're seeing kind of increasing conversions from that. But it is hard. UTMs are also an idea that people might want to start looking at more, I think, adding kind of UTM parameters onto the end of URLs for certain campaigns or press coverage or kind of whatever you can, so that when that's then getting cited, we've got an idea of where those users might be coming in through from a marketing channel perspective. But yeah, it's kind of all up in the air, and I think a lot will change in 2026 in terms of what different tools are offering to help us with that tracking as well.
Kelsey, what are your thoughts about tracking, about metrics, about how you measure success in 26?
Yeah, I mean, everyone here agrees, right? If you work in SEO, you get measured generally by qualified traffic, and it can come from many different sources, whether it's Google or ChatGPT or social. When I was a moderator at SMX Advanced, I was on a session for Athena HQ, which is a great new AI tool for kind of helping to quantify the value of certain authoritative brand mentions or placements, and like really quantifying the number of times it might appear in certain results across all the different chat platforms. So that's a great one to use too. I would say beyond the traditional things we're all used to with the qualified traffic and building content hubs around the topics that you want to drive your entity or your digital footprint around, so that you can be recognized across all these platforms as the expert in your specific space. Another thing a lot of the clients measure us by specifically is the volume of authoritative brand placements we can earn for them. So press on like a CNBC or USA Today or Independent, Daily Mail, depending on their industry, Vice, things like that. And so for us, the signals that we're looking at oftentimes are more around the authority of the brand. So whether you measure that by domain authority or domain rating, really looking at that over the course of a 6 to 12 month engagement has always been a big signal, as well as the number of authoritative brand placements, which I'd say generally we're looking for anything over a domain authority of 60 or 70 is a big publisher within that industry that can help drive those signals for clients, in that they are the expert in their industry, and just build out kind of that entity awareness for their brand or the profile, right? For both AI systems to have built out their knowledge graph around that brand being expert, because they're cited in a lot of different places as the authority on this topic, in addition to general traffic signals as well.
And Sabine, what are your thoughts on measuring success in 26?
Yeah, well, all really like the same relevant topics that we have had with our clients, but I'd say that it's kind of in two parts. That the first part is how do we kind of measure if we're a part of the discussion, like when there are citations to be tracked, can we track them, and to go together with what other brands are we being mentioned? So kind of still kind of evaluating what type of LLM trackers that truly give us value that we can do any like actions on. So there are a few that we are evaluating right now, and some are a bit too pricey, according to me, when it comes to what type of value they actually give businesses. So it's one thing to know that you are being cited for maybe the 5 prompts that you are adding to this tool, but then how can we kind of scale that and understand our like share of AI search? And I don't think that tools are necessarily there yet, since it's so limited data that we are being able to access right now. But kind of finding those metrics and being citations or mentions in the AI spaces for knowing if we're a part of the conversation, and then also quality in the traffic. So as Georgia was talking about, maybe not looking just at the end conversion, but also maybe on micro conversions and how we kind of play a part in giving maybe qualified leads or getting subscribers to our newsletter from our SEO traffic, and not only looking at, okay, what contributed to like certain purchases. So kind of, breaking it down to the value as a whole.
So an integral part of what's included in an SEO strategy for 26 has to be content. And obviously the way that content's done, the volume of content that is required has changed significantly. The competition out there, the challenge to raise your head compared with your competitors out there. So what's the secret? Do we have to focus on volume? Do we have to be highly selective in terms of the type of content that we publish, the persona that we're attempting to optimize for? Kelsey, what are some thoughts that you have in relation to what should be incorporated within our content strategy for 26?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to content strategy, you have to think about how do you stand out from these new AI systems, whether it's Google AI overviews that's distilling content, or one of the chat platforms, or anything. And so you don't want to just be regurgitating what's already out there, right? Because AI systems won't be trained on that in the very near future. They're going to be able to detect their own AI slop and then not include that in their training sets. They won't query against it. And so really you want to go above and beyond what's already being said. And the best way you can do that is using your own internal proprietary data. If you have it, you can use your in-house like subject matter experts that, whether you're doing interviews with them on a monthly basis and then kind of spinning that out into 10 custom articles or whatnot, or you're using those quotes then to pitch them to get featured on an Inc. or a Forbes or a Huffington Post, whatever sector they're in. I think adding unique value and expertise from your brand to the internet is the way to kind of stand out and build that profile online nowadays. And then beyond just using your proprietary data and in-house experts, really looking at how can you conduct research within your field so that you are providing something new to the internet that could be used and referenced by these AI systems, especially when you can attach your brand to something that's happening in the news or something that's coming up in the news cycle. There's lots of cyclical events, from back to school to summer breaks to tech events to things like that, Valentine's Day. Most brands can attach themselves to things like that to stay relevant in an emerging kind of news cycle and get away from a lot of the AI slop that people are cranking out. So the whole volume game, right? Like look at the HubSpot case study last year. Brands used to go super tangential to what they did just to get a lot of traffic, but that traffic doesn't convert. And so what nowadays, it's much more kind of on brand and focus, leveraging kind of the unique lens and expertise that you have through data and people, and then getting that spread out across social, podcasts, influential publishers, niche publishers in your industry, kind of building that profile that way, I think is really important versus just crank out a bunch of fluff nowadays.
Okay, so interesting that you led with thought leaders internally, the kind of data that you can actually produce internally as a company. And I don't think you mentioned the keyword phrase at all. Do you do much research in terms of keyword phrases?
I think it's more now about like conversational search than necessarily keyword dumping. Like, yes, you need to understand the keywords within your space, but generally now people, the way that they're querying outside of Google is more conversational. I think even I saw a recent study that it said like on AI platforms, it's more like 5 to 9 or 7 to 9 phrases versus, keyword search used to be 1 to 2 words that people searched. So, Google isn't going anywhere, right? Like I think I have a stat I wrote down earlier about like there's 80 billion monthly visits to Google versus 5.8 billion to ChatGPT, right? Like that's a nominal amount by comparison, but it's still 5.8 billion and it's growing rapidly. And so that's the only reason that I am including more of that kind of the AI takeaways in addition to traditional search, because you really want to be everywhere now to leverage all the different platforms. And to do that, I think it's less keyword based.
So shall we go to you in terms of your thoughts on content strategy for 26?
Yeah. Pretty much +1 to what Kelsey said on that. And I'm really a big proponent of owning topics and basically trying to, because you can have competitors that have a higher domain authority or produce a higher rate of content, etc., and you're churning it out. But there are unique things to each brand that they are best positioned to talk about topically. And I think a lot of people fail to even go to outside their marketing teams to like the sales teams, let alone like people on the shop floor or within the office, whatever, that are experts on topics. I've been at the company for like 5, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. So there's a rich amount of content ideation, within an organization. And I think if you kind of put on paper, what are the topics, what are the people, experts that we have, what topics can we talk about, and then cross-reference that with what you see online with your competitors talking about and how well do they talk about that stuff, you can quickly isolate, okay, we're better positioned to talk about this stuff than those guys. Let's focus on these topics and own these topics. And it doesn't matter if they have a higher domain authority or put more budget in, digital PR or whatever. We can smash it on these topics, and we know that this activity will rank because it has been proven you can outrank people by owning topics, not necessarily having the most backlinks, but that has a knock-on effect to being an authority on these topics and having your EEAT and helpful content boxes ticked. You've got visible authors associated with those topics, and then you will naturally earn those links or be in a position where if you do some outreach, people will prefer you over other people because you've got an author that's an expert on this topic and this big piece of data-driven content that you pushed out, and you've got a spokesperson, and then you're basically primed to do some digital PR or at least earn topics because you're seen as the authority on that. So I'm really a big proponent of owning topics and doing that work ahead of all of that to figure out what are we best at talking about and pulling from those internal resources beyond the marketing team and even the sales team to get those ideas.
It's one thing to optimize for a topic and to eventually, hopefully, own that topic, rank for that topic, drive traffic for that particular topic. But how do you ensure that the topic you selected is the right topic for your brand and resonates most with your customers?
Yeah, so I try and identify that at the content audit and strategy stage. So when I'm figuring out, within the buyer's journey, what kind of content and topics are our personas engaging with or will engage with, where's the value in that, and basically do some research to kind of back that up a little bit, some keyword research and looking at the search volumes, etc., and just what people are searching for versus what they land on a certain page with. Where in that buyer's journey does that page exist? And so from that point, I can paint a picture of what are these engaged with topics, from search volume through to click-through rate, etc., through to engagement and conversion, and then basically map that to the buyer's journey. Say, okay, people are engaging with these topics in the form of FAQs, in the form of a long form, short form guide, a blog, etc., to progress them a little bit throughout this stage of the buyer's journey through to conversion and even retention, getting them back. So it's that little bit of research and looking at things like search volumes and engagement, click-through rates, conversion, etc., related to the topics they searched for.
And Georgia, how do you select the content that you should be incorporating in your 2026 SEO strategy?
I think there's a lot of pressure on brands and SEOs at the moment to try and scale content as quickly as possible now that AI kind of facilitates us to be able to do that, and absolutely incorporate that and use that to streamline your workflows. But I was listening to a podcast actually recently, and Kate Winslet was speaking about grief, and she was speaking about how after she lost her mum, the first thing she did was she went into Google and she just searched up coffins, because it was this really sort of human moment where she was like, I didn't know what to do, and so I turned to Google. And I think it really resonated with me, as I think that's a situation we've probably all been in, where you just search isn't actually just about discovery, it's also some really desperate human moments that come into search, and we've all sort of been there, worrying about ourselves, what to do next, worrying about people who are close to us, and turning to search engines, to ChatGPT, to LLMs, in times when we are quite vulnerable and quite delicate and sensitive. So I think it's important for brands to remember that, and to kind of show up as human, and connecting to your users as people, and not just as kind of this all-consuming mass, because if we lose sight of that, then we're sort of making our content a lot less useful for users. And like Kelsey said, we're reproducing stuff that's already out there, and if we end up with loads of AI slop, then we're inhibiting the opportunity to form that connection with users. And yes, healthcare brands, funeral brands probably know that they have those really vulnerable users, but I'd say don't underestimate the power of your content as well. You might be putting out an article that's like, how to dress for X event, a garden party, thinking, oh yeah, this is just going to go out and it's going to be read by loads of people who are just like looking to shop and looking to do whatever. But it also might be read by somebody who has got no idea of the cultural norms of that event and is completely new to it and is desperately trying to fit in and to not be not feel uncomfortable there, who then is like I said, in that kind of vulnerable stage of searching. And I think if you can capture those users, then not only are you genuinely being a nice person and helping them out. I know we say like it's not ER, it's PR quite a lot, and whilst I think that's great for like the work-life balance, we can have an impact on people's lives, and I think that's quite rewarding as a marketer to think that. But also you've then got a customer who's connected to your brand and is going to be much more loyal, and that loyalty in this era of where there are so much competition, so many distractions and different touch points, is sort of more valuable than ever. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different approaches to content strategy, and these guys have said some great things, but I just say my advice to SEOs would be to try and keep that human element and use real writers who are going to care about their craft and care about the work they're putting out.
Okay, Sabine, keep that human element, use real writers. Is there anything that's particularly resonating with you, and something that you'd like to add in terms of your content strategy for 26?
Yeah, well, starting where you started, is it quantity against quality, and talking about the human aspect. I think a lot of people are sitting there and trying to use these these AI tools in order to be more efficient, but to really just understand that we are the most, we really want to listen to people and like their recommendations. So to have that human aspect as experts on your content on your websites are super central for multiple different reasons. And also kind of going back to why are we, for example, going to social media to do research? Well, maybe it's because we trust those content creators, or we want to hear recommendations from a person and not just read through a very well-written guide. So that kind of, I think, connects that we need that human aspect of the content.
Right. Okay. Talking about the human aspect of content, comment saying definitely human element is the one very critical thing. It's a differentiator among a plethora of AI generated articles. And talking about AI generated things, there's definitely a few bots leaving comments that I'm not going to read out because they're just mindless rubbish, really. And it's intriguing that it seems to be relatively easy to distinguish between AI and human in terms of comments on videos, but also, I guess, content within web pages as well. Are we going to move to a stage where AI can produce incredible content, perhaps incredible videos as well? Or are we some time away from that? Kelsey, I saw you nodding a bit away there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are definitely ways to incorporate AI in the creative and writing process that don't rely on it 100%, but allow you to scale your production in a voice that still emulates you. I've written for sites like Harvard Business Review and Inc., a lot of marketing publishers over the years. And what I've done is I scraped a lot of those articles that I've written and I fed it into GPT and I had it create a writer's genome for me. So basically analyzing my sentence structure, my writing style, the way I make claims. Since I do a lot of research in the industry, it identified that typically I'm opening sentences with like a surprising stat, and then I'm closing them with like the answer to the potential concern. So it can get very, very granular. I think it was like a 30-page document that it ended up creating for me. And now whenever I do research, I'm able to work with AI to both analyze the data that I'm doing and then also help me write a initial outline or first draft that is very much sounds exactly like me. Whereas I can definitely spot when people just go to GPT and say, write a sentence about digital PR or something like that, right? Like they all have the same kind of phrases that it uses and everyone talks about M dashes. For the record, I do love an M dash in general, but I generally will filter them out now, just instruct it not to, because everyone's kind of so on the fence about it. So I think there are ways to incorporate it that allow you, when you're using elements like, okay, here's my specific subject matter expertise on a study I did, and here's my writing style from like a 30-page doc of my writer's genome. Now I'll pair this together into first draft. That will produce a content quality that's 10x what somebody might just spit out in a single prompt on GPT without any context. So Fractal has over 40, 50 clients that we work with. And over time, what we're trying to do is kind of do that same, distill their writer's voice, their brand voice, and help us scale it this way. So I feel like when people are hesitant to use AI in that way, maybe they're just not thinking more critically about how you can use its analysis to help scale content versus just regurgitation of what's out there already.
It's always challenging as well to actually decide what to do first and who to think of first, because we want to talk about changes in terms of technology and where we have to be, but we also want to talk about things like buyer journey as well. And it's challenging to actually determine where that buyer journey takes place, if it takes place on our website, or perhaps some of it takes place off our website as well. So is buyer journey something that we need to identify and map out before essentially agreeing an SEO strategy for 26?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I think the buyer's journey, yes, it takes place on your site, but also it takes place everywhere else that people haven't found you yet. So the more you can assess your buyer's journey and then get that content in all the places that your target market might be asking those questions or engaging, whether it's Reddit or a podcast in your industry or an association's blog in your industry. So how can you lend your expertise on any one of those sites about those questions, in addition to, like Sukh said, answering it on your site as a very robust guide with your unique subject matter expertise and data. And then that will naturally earn links too. And then you're also getting it out everywhere else that people are searching with that question. So I think it's a bit of both, but it always starts, I would say, with the buyer's journey and their pain points. And, of course, there's tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush and SparkToro that give you a lot of the drilled in details about what your target market is asking online, where they're asking it, what content of your competitors is outranking yours, it gets more traffic than yours, and where are those content gaps. So, SEO 101 is still very much relevant today, and building that very robust on-site content strategy around the hubs that you want to be found for is key. And then really pairing that, I think, with the authority building is where then you become a bit more untouchable in your industry.
So does it all start with a buyer journey?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't expand that scope to include, those external sources, like particularly if you're looking at the awareness stage, and they might, list the homepage or a blog article, for example, but they also need to list like LinkedIn or like, image search even, or an X post or something that was well engaged with on a topic. So like, I think they do need to expand the scope of that. And I find it a useful tool to map everything to a buyer's journey as much as possible without trying to be too stringently, focused on it as well. Because you can also, people find you in all types of places, not just on the website, but externally as well, and result in a conversion So yeah, I think it's important to expand the scope of that and to use that as a tool. And also kind of getting more bang for buck in terms of the content pieces that you produce as well. So like I like the example of podcasts, for example, because you can get, you've got the audio podcast, you've got the video, you've got a transcribed version, and you can convert that to a blog post as well, and then you can snip that up to the different platforms with little image clips and that, and then also little quotes and that. So you can basically get so much a variety of content just from one bit of content. And I like to do that on the reverse with the blogs as well, and like case studies, for example, chopping them up, the statistics and all that, and for all the different mediums. Going a bit slightly off topic on that, but we talk about that all day.
Let's maybe just get Georgia's and Sabine's viewpoint on starting off with perhaps the buyer journey. Georgia, how important is the buyer journey, and is that what you start off with?
Yeah, it is important, and it's important, like kind of Kelsey and Sukh have said, to know or have an idea of where your audience might be showing up and make sure that you're kind of delivering in those places. I think if you get too weighed down in it, you will just go a bit mad, because trying to map journeys that are so complicated is just impossible now. But making sure that there's a connection between each of your platforms as well, and that there's kind of consistent messaging. Maybe there's a social trend that your social team have jumped on, and like said, that's great. Can you get a blog post for people who see that on social media and go, oh, what's that? I'm going to look that up on Google. Great, now they found a blog post. Can you get, if it's e-commerce, like a landing page showcasing your products that fit into that trend, like a collections page or a PLP. So having that connection between your touch points and not just putting anything out in isolation, I think, is an important way to ensure that your user journey, no matter where people do come in and find you, they're then on a path that they can continue until they get to that final stage, and you're facilitating that as easy as possible, rather than just putting something out there doing really well but actually not having any connection with what's going on with your other channels. So that's where that cross-channel communication again is just becoming more and more important.
Sabine, do you try and set out a path that you'd like your users to take?
A path I'd like them to take. No, but I think with buyer journeys also, I think it's easy, especially in bigger companies, that the social media team do their version of a buyer's journey, and then the search team do theirs, and then the ads team. So also maybe when we talked about how do we set KPIs and common goals within the company, then also just making sure that do everyone have the same basic kind of view on what the buyer's journey is, so that we're kind of working also towards the same goal, and then kind of merging them. And of course the search buyer's journey can be a bit more in detail, but just so we speak the same language within the company. And also, the repurposing of content with the podcast, I definitely agree that that's such a common discussion that we have with our articles and guides and everything we create within the SEO team, that is of huge value for other teams. So when we're talking about, okay, how do we evaluate the success of the SEO work that we've done during the year, then we need to kind of also put a value on how we make the life easier for other teams within the company, and how we create value for them, and what does that like equal in money or a metric or so.
Sabine, you mentioned the search team, the ads team. You also touched upon the social team earlier on as well. How do we ensure that what we wish to do as a strategy aligns with other people within the marketing department, other marketing channels out there, and get some kind of coherent picture running there? Kelsey, shall I ask you to start on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I really think if you're working in an agency, that onboarding period is really critical. Typically, we have people join from the founding team and social, PR, brand. It's always interesting to me. The bigger the company gets, the more subsets of like PR and then brand and then earned media, and they kind of can all overlap. So I think getting the biggest amount of data dump up front. We have like a 30, 40 question client onboarding questionnaire where we're looking for all those questions around, your favorite pieces of content, your customer pain points. We'll run surveys for their customer profiles to ask those exact questions too, to feed the content funnels. I think that bringing people together, though it can be challenging, right? Because especially in bigger companies, I think everybody wants to impress the boss and say something right, and can result in a little bit more contention sometimes. So that's why I've always really liked a form or a Google Doc that people fill out, because then it can be kind of much more open-ended and honest. And then we can distill that versus it being a meeting where, you know, maybe that doesn't happen as well in certain companies than others. But getting that, I think, is really important. You know, silos have been a thing for years that people talk about. And, you know, while it's good that each team can potentially run their own, I think now more than ever, if you can really focus on doing very robust content, using your experts, using your data, and using those pain points, and build one really great campaign that can be spread across all those channels, that's what's going to move the needle best, versus everybody kind of doing their own disparate things nowadays.
And you also talk about, Kelsey, you also talk about earned media and SEO converging. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I started in SEO, people really just talked about like link buying and link networks and kind of offshore teams that you could use back in, you know, the early 2000s. And then kind of SEO evolved over the years into more, instead of, you're not paying for links, right? Because Google penalizes that. We all know that. You have to earn them. You have to earn your press coverage. And the best way to do that, and my experience has been, you have to produce something of value that's newsworthy, that's surprising, that's emotionally evocative. We did a study on Harvard Business Review about how the element of surprise and can evoke the greatest sharing. So you're more likely to share content if it surprises you or provides that value, right? And so we kind of weave those elements into any type of research that we're doing, so that we have those kind of newsworthy hooks, but that are also educational and valuable resources that people want to engage with and share, and that publishers actually want to cover because they're interesting and they're timely. So you got to kind of nail that trifecta. And I think by involving more people in that ideation process, you're more likely to hit that nail on the head, right? It's like this golden unicorn that you can achieve when you do. But I think that is really key to success nowadays, is going beyond kind of the basic blog post. While they're still very valuable, the more robust it can be, the better chance it has for being an evergreen link building magnet, where you don't even have to pitch it, right? People are sourcing it because it's appearing in all the platforms and it's a great guide. And then you can pitch it because it actually is something that's newsworthy and valuable to whether it's niche publishers or mainstream. But I think what it comes back to is those signals, right? Your goal as a brand right now is to build your entity profiles, the keywords and things that you want to be known for. And the best way to do that is to target a lot of different platforms and sites that then point back to you as the authority in your industry on the topics that you're getting coverage on, or that you're writing on your blog and earning coverage from. And by doing that, that's the best way to drive your site authority and your overall ability for these systems and their knowledge graphs to define you as the number one authority in your industry on this topic, and then constantly be referencing you and reinforcing that, versus, you know, traditional Google SERPs where they had 10 people or 10 sites to look through. Now they're getting one distilled answer. And the more and more you can build your site up as the authority around your specific topics, the more likely you are going to be referenced when somebody queries that later.
Georgia, how does an SEO work more effectively with other channels in order to actually develop a more holistic strategy for the coming year?
Yeah, I think it's kind of become more and more important in the age of like AI search as well, that we just ensure that we've got consistent messaging, that we're kind of speaking to social teams and paid teams and actually off non-digital teams as well about what they're putting out there. Because previously kind of searchers would type something in and they'd be presented with whatever we've put on the website, and that will be the information that they get. But now, because AI pulls from so many different sources, it's going to be pulling in the kind of the information that's put out on social as well, and the information that is put out in kind of in press, that's the coverage of that out of home piece that you did. And so making sure that all of that ties in, and that there's no kind of big gaps there, that you're all aligned, is really key to just making sure that there's no discrepancies in those answers. But also, I think really what it all comes back down to is brand. Search is driving brand is driving search more than it has done previously. And I think that also goes for kind of all of the channels. So if you don't have a really nailed down value proposition, then we'll sit down together and figure out what that is. What is the value that you're going to be focusing on, that you can bring to the market, and how are each of you demonstrating that in kind of your different channels is a really good place to start. And then thinking about commercial priorities, where you want to push, and who that responsibility is going to sit with. Is that going to be something that's pushed across all channels, or actually does it make more sense for certain channels to push more heavily on certain platforms, because maybe search is happening more for one thing on Google and another thing on TikTok, which is absolutely fine. You just need to make sure that then when those users from TikTok are landing on the site, they're able to still find the whatever it was that was being advertised on there easily, and we're facilitating that full user journey no matter where they've come from.
Lovely. Sabine, we'll come to you just last, just to summarize your thoughts on this particular topic, how we actually incorporate SEO in other marketing strategies, and hopefully are completely aligned with everything that we're doing. But Sukh, I heard you, or saw you, nodding vigorously there to Georgia. So what do you agree with, and what do you perhaps wish to add?
Yeah, I like the idea of a tangible example that you can share amongst teams and looking at sources. And so what I was going to say was, oh yeah, we could route these in KPIs that we all share, etc. And that's cool. But what I like doing as well is going into LLM refs and seeing under a prompt, who's appearing for that high or low amongst competitors. And then you click on, what sources are behind that appearance. And I can say, oh, this is you guys. And this bit of coverage is you guys, whatever, something that you did. And so I can basically say, okay, let's do more of that. So can we do more encourage more user-generated content, do more engaged with social posts along this, and do more kind of paid stuff that results in a, UTM click to the landing page that comes up in these sources. And so I like using the idea of using those tangible examples to buy people in different teams, and basically have that kind of visual representation of this is what we're kind of impacting. So the more of them that I tend to use in the past, the more successful that buy-in and collaboration seem to be, as well as kind of scheduling in these catch-ups and brainstorming and this, that, and the other. Sources.
Sabine, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think the struggle is for everyone to kind of understand, okay, but why does this matter for me, for our developer team, or for the PR team, or why should I care? And truly show those examples of, okay, why does the SEO team talk so much about the impact of social search or AI? And then truly show those examples of, okay, look at this piece of Instagram content that you did. It's great. But look at the opportunity that we have if we would actually optimize this for search, doing this, and tap into the search volumes that you have and increase that discoverability on Instagram, or showing the other teams on actual concrete examples of how this could make them look better as a team for their boss, because their channel would perform better if they had this layer of search added to their work.
Wow. A lot of incredible thoughts shared as part of the discussion. I'm sure the discussion could keep on going. Hopefully it will result in a part 2 at some point. But in the meantime, let's whiz round our panel and ask where the listener can find out more about them. Starting off with Georgia.
You can find me on LinkedIn at my LinkedIn is just Georgia-James-SEO. Or if you want to find out more about the agency that I work at, then flauntdigital.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And also with us was Sukh.
Yeah, if you just Google Sukhjinder SEO, I should be appearing at the top there, or just put that in LinkedIn as well. My website is idoseo.co.uk as well.
Lovely. Thanks so much for joining us again, Sukh. And also with us was Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm just my full name, Kelsey Libert, on LinkedIn, and my agency is Fractal. It's frac.tl, so frac.tl. And you can also find about 25 AI workflow tools that we're currently beta testing as well on our site for free right now.
Thank you, Kelsey. And also joining us today was Sabine.
Yes, so you'll find me on LinkedIn, Sabine Ljunggren, or have a look at mayamarketing.com, which is the agency that I represent.
Lovely. Thanks so much. I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to the Majestic SEO panel. If you want to join us live next time, sign up at majestic.com/webinars. And of course, check out SEOin2026.com too. Bye-bye for now.
Hi, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Bye.